Welcome everyone to the LITT support session. This is Tim Gilderdale here. Alright, so we'll get started with the session. Start with a quick general advice warning. Any advice given is general only and does not consider your circumstances, and you need to decide if it is appropriate to you, and past performance is not an indicator of future returns. So we've had a bit of a slow week with the trades coming through again this week, but once again we're seeing James Hardy being flagged, which is always a good sign when it keeps coming back. It's had a fairly solid run. It seems every second or third day it's starting to get flagged again at the moment. So it's pulled back a little bit after yesterday's high open, and it's come back currently to 25.23. It's still above the 50-day moving average with a bit of an increase in gap, but it's starting to come back a little bit closer. It's quite comfortably above that $25 mark. I'll run through a couple of other trades, but was there anything that you guys wanted me to have a look at in detail? If there is, just send it through. So we've had a new, well, it's been flagged in the past, but it's been flagged again, lens. So it's continued its breakout and continuing its upward trajectory, starting to even pull back a little bit further from, or push forward a little bit further from that 50-day moving average. So a lot of green in this chart since it's broken through back in mid-October. And it looks like there's some strong buying pressure that's been hitting in the last couple of days, last 3 days. The ADX is quite high, a lot of directional bias in these movements, and the implied volatility, even though they're quite large movements, it still is quite, it's not too high, so you won't be paying or overpaying too much for the options on Lend-Lease. Let's have a look here. So Ben suggested we have a look at IGO, Bob. This is not a stock I'm familiar with. It looks like it's a no liability stock, which does change everything. It is a miner by the looks of it, if it's no liability. I wouldn't really be able to say much about this. Most of the things that will be happening with these miners will be more on fundamentals, whether they're hitting product or whether their production capacity is got a lot of economies of scale achievable within their location and their commodity. I don't know anything about this stock at all, so I won't really be able to comment on it. We've also had, since our last session, so Lend-Lease was pulled up on the 24th and again today, which we were just looking at a moment ago. You can see there was a bit of a golden cross back here mid-June. Fantastic price rise, pushed through the $17 mark where there was a lot of price action and then bounced up and then bounced off again. Second bounce really pushed through for the breakout. Expecting a resistance at 20. See what happens. There might be one before then, but that would be a great rise if it could go all the way up to 20 before that happens. So we'll look at some of the bigger banks. So Commonwealth Bank right near the 50-day moving average. NAB's pulling back to its 50-day moving average. Westpac's a little bit below, probably start pulling back towards it. And ANZ is pulling back towards its 50-day moving average as well. If we have a look at BHP, it's doing the same thing, so we'd expect a lot of the market to be going in that direction, pulling back to this 50-day moving average, as we've seen today. So we've got what's appeared to be a fairly strong resistance level at 6,750. And it's tried to push through that twice this week already, and now it looks like it's bounced off and is going to start pulling back down probably towards that 50-day moving average. Seems to be running through a bit of a cycle there, trying to get through, then coming back down. And then if it goes below that 6,600 mark, Usually within a month, it may have bounced back up. This time around, if it pushes through that 6,600 mark, I expect it to bounce off the 200-day moving average and come back up. Let's have a look at FMG here. It's right at the top of its trading range, pulled back a little bit. Probably there'll be more price action between $8 and $9 again, as there has been over the last few weeks. Were there any other stocks that any of you guys wanted me to have a look at, or that you wanted a bit more of a detailed understanding around? Let's have a look at Rio, hey? Thanks, Paul. So Rio seems to have fallen back off with most of the other miners back in August. Now somewhat range trading, probably $92 mark is another resistance level. Yeah, it's interesting with this one. It looks like it's quite close to getting squeezed between the 50-day moving average and the 92 mark, which is where it will decide which way it will go, and that will basically be decided on which side of the 50-day moving average it wants to trade on. Since mid-September, it looks like it's been trading right on that 50-day moving average. With a relatively small distance around it. It's always hard to pick with the miners. A lot of the sentiment is very reliant on commodity prices and futures, commodity futures. So it can be a little bit difficult to pinpoint over the midterm. But I'd expect this to continue falling, at least to that 50-day moving average, and then either gap over it or stagnate there for a couple of days. Here's an interesting one, S32. So it's bounced off its $2.40 support level. It's a very old support level from back in 2016 and 2017, but it did end up being quite an important support level. It had a massive rise here once it was able to push through all the sellers, and there were none left. All the buyers just came in and pushed the pricing pressure up to $2.60, where it now is. Now that the stock is consolidated above the 50-day moving average, we'll be looking to see whether it can continue to travel upward, or whether it will just fall back into its long-term decline, as we've seen since April. But if it was going to come back, this would be where the market will decide whether it will come back or whether it will end up jumping back through this support level. We've got STO here. It looks like it's coming in for a bit of a breakout trade as well. The ADX is quite high. It had its breakout trade on this day, the 14th of the 10th, a potential for breakout when they announced their merger, vertical integration with one of their suppliers. And since then, it seems there's, at least in the last week, some positive market sentiment about that whole process. And now the market is back up to breakout levels again. It's probably almost time for a lit long on this one. It may have been flagged a couple of times throughout the day last week, maybe Thursday and Friday. But there is quite a bit of distance now between the stock and this 50-day moving average. So you just have to be careful with the way that you manage that trade if it does turn against you, whether you jump out a little bit early. Have a look at another one. Woolworths was in the news today, underpaid staff by about $300 million from as far back as 2010. They are looking to remediate that oversight, but that is, of course, quite a substantial sum. So we expect that this stock will be absorbing that news over the coming days, and if there is something that's going to push Woolworths below that 50-day moving average, which has been quite happy to trade on top of for most of this year, then it would be something like a $300 million unpaid bill to staff. Time will tell, though, whether that will push it down that much, but it looks like it has had quite a significant fall already on the open by about 40 cents roughly, 35 to 40 cents. We'll have a look at what's happening in the stock screener. We'll look at the trading scan first. So quite a few stocks approaching. Macquarie and Seek, interesting ones. I'll have a look at Seek. So Seek's IV rank is quite low, which is interesting because it is getting flagged for lit long trades. It's got its ADX above 20, 50-day moving average is above 200-day moving averages. A lot of green here in this chart since the beginning of October. That's a solid sign for a breakout. You see quite often though with Seek, when it does these large upward moves, when it opens a bit low and trades up through the day, often the next day it will open higher and then just trade lower as well. It's happened a few times when I've accidentally put positions in just for them to, all the gains to be reversed. But even then, the implied volatility is actually for a tech company and for Seek itself right at the moment, it is very low. It's around that 23 mark. And that means that there's potential to jump into option trades at a bit of a discount. There's not much volatility in there. And if that is going to be a breakout trade, then there's potential for that volatility to increase as well by the time you exit your position. And we'll have a look at one last one here, Macquarie Group. Another one being close to being flagged again for a lit long trade. Just got to get over this point here. Close at 136. So it's almost there. A few things will pull this back. Dividend is due on the, I think it's in 12 days. And I believe reporting season is coming up. So a few things to look out for there. But there has been a lot of buying pressure in Macquarie as well. When it falls, it tends to gap down a bit. When it rises, funnily enough, it tends to gap as well on the rise. It is a bit of a volatile mover, at least over the last couple of weeks compared to where it has been. So it was closer to that 12 mark earlier back in September, and now it's up to about 20, 22. And was there any other stocks you wanted me to look at, or anything you wanted me to touch base on? Or any view you want to share on where the market's going or where certain stocks are going? So Rowan's just jumped in. Let's have a look at LLC, so I'll jump into that one again. LLC, it's an interesting one. A lot of green in the chart, all the way back from mid-August. There's a few red days in there, but it's mostly buying activity throughout the day. It's a golden cross back in early July, and there was some big breakouts mid-August. A lot of price action around the $17 mark over the month of September. And then it's began what looks like another breakout move over the past month, or past 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. Be looking at a resistance for this one being around this $20 mark. Potentially another resistance, or maybe some price action around the $19 mark as well. Maybe 1950. I don't see 1950 being on the way up. If it's a breakout, it could just push through both of those levels, but yeah, it might be a bit of price action around there for a couple of days, like there was around this $17 mark. So if you're in a lit long on LLC, you'd be looking at, let's have a look here. Lit long. At this stage, I'd probably put it towards December, between 30 and 60 days. Roughly 3,000 profit, 3,000 loss. So you'd be looking at maximum profit if you were to jump into this today, being around $19.57. I would probably, if it was at 19.57, the maximum gain, I would probably just jump out at the resistance level at $19.50. I wouldn't worry about the 7 cents because it could pull back at that level. That's just my preference. Purely just being because when this was around 19.50, the stock was bouncing on it a little bit. If you put your strikes out a little bit further though, then you could look at getting a bit more growth from the trade. But I'd probably just leave it how it is, the way that it's set up, and jump out at 19.50. It seems like intuitively like a good spot for that strike to be, to just get out when it hits it. Put this line on again. Here we go. It's 19.50. Roughly around there. So we had quite a bit of price action between 19 and 19.50 in September last year, in June last year, and then between 19.50 and 20. It's quite comfortable on top of that support level. So on its way up, might meet a bit of resistance around the 19 or 19.50 mark, where there'll be a bit of price action around there, potentially bounce off for a couple of days. Were there any other stocks that you wanted me to look at or go into? So we've got Tabcorp from Rowan. Let's have a look. It's a bit of green, quite a bit of red now. It's had a golden cross. That's a lot of red. 7 days of red, basically. I'll be pretty careful with this one. There's a lot of price action on that $4.80 mark. I don't really know this one. I probably just wouldn't. I'm not familiar with what could work for a stock like this. This could go in any direction. There was a lot of green at this point where it started to push up. There's a lot of red at this point where it could potentially push down. When you look at periods back here where there's a lot of red, eventually it does push down. But not always. It's a bit of red here and it ended up doing a breakout. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Volatility's okay. It's not too high, not too low. ADX is pretty low. There's just no direction in it. It's probably the definition of random walk, really. The stock's been trading basically sideways since maybe June last year, with a bit of a down and a bit of an upswing. And the 200-day and 50-day moving averages are right nearby each other, which means that the short-term and long-term valuations are roughly in line with each other. And the stock price just seems to be circling around them at this stage. So until there's something that happens on a fundamental level or within the industry, it's just going to be a little bit random. You could see back at this stage, there was a bit of an upward progression here. It's easy to see in hindsight. It might have been hard to see at the time, but let's maybe lower that to what it would look like at the time. Something like that. See, it's quite clear. It's bouncing through there. It's quite clear when it came down. This jump was kind of changed that pattern completely, and now it's just a bit all over the shop. There's no clear direction. There is a pivot point at $4.50, and I assume there's one near $5. Yeah, and $4.80. It's a tricky one. Yeah, there's always a chance of a price drop with a stock like this. Ron sent over a question. Any chance of a price drop? There's always a chance. This stock, it doesn't look like it's healthily above that 50-day moving average. All that red means that it could just fall straight through it as soon as it hits it. It just seems to be a lot of sellers in the market after it opens. We'll have a look at another one here, CSL from Trudy. So CSL's had a pretty good run, bit of a breakout here. Golden cross back here in, what's a while back now, April. And this has, it looks like a strong upward bias. The ADX would say the same, or starting to say the same. Roughly the upward trend. It has broken out at the top here, which is usually expected of a breakout trade, but it could bring some short-term selling pressure back into the market, maybe bring it back down to this 50-day moving average before it continues up again. So it depends how short-term you're looking, but over the last 2 weeks, it looks like there has been a bit of selling pressure whenever it does breach outside of that that upper diagonal line, resistance line. You could always maybe edit the line, push it out a little bit and see if we've just a bit strict on where that position is. But even then, it just seems a bit far out. Yeah, it's interesting. It looks like a good breakout stock, but very short term, as in weeks, there could be some significant selling pressure, as there has been back here at this level. One to keep your eye on for sure. The more you look at it, there's more potential for a big price move in either direction, either above or below that resistance. Its current resistance lines that it's meeting at. We'll jump back to the XJO. All right, so with we had a look through the so it's interesting with the XJO. It's whenever the banks move, it seems like the XJO, more often than not, well, more likely to move along with it. And with all the banks moving towards their 50-day moving averages at the moment, it looks like the bank is, the XJO, the overall index, is starting to do a bit of the same. But in terms of double top, I don't think it's unexpected for the market to come up to that point and then bounce off again quite quickly. It's probably going to happen a few times. It has done it in the past here. But it seems like in recent times it has been caught within this range of 6,750 to basically 6,500. It seems to be quite comfortable trading around there in recent times. And with a lot of price action above the 6,618 mark. But in terms of a big fall based on that, there's potential. It's hard to tell with an index. The buyers, there were slow and steady increases in the price after this first correction back in August. Once it met that 50-day moving average, a lot of green, nice and slow, corrected again, a lot of green, much quicker. Looks like the volatility was a bit higher while these big price movements were happening. But they're still, based on the candle, they're still kind of continuing on. They're still moving quite rapidly compared to here. If the market can open above that 6,750 mark one of these days, then it's probably going to be somewhat comfortable there for a couple of days. It might start pushing back up towards that 6,800 mark fairly quickly. But it's been trying and it just can't get through there. So I'm not really seeing it that much as a, I'd say it's probably going to fall through or bounce off the 50-day moving average before it hits this bottom. It's probably the same bottom, actually, by the time it comes down. In which case, there'll probably be a bit of buying pressure in there if it's a slow fall. Have a look at CSL again. CSL, it really depends whether, Choose asked a question, is CSL in a double top? So it really depends on what happens right here. If this market can close above that $2.57 mark, roughly, then there could be some further buying pressure to continue that breakout. If it can't do that though, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a double top. It falls below this low here, all the way back down to the 50-day moving average before the market will decide what to do at that stage. So I'd say it's more likely with CSL than the XJO, based purely on the technicals there. We've got Rowan, just asking about JHX again, James Hardy. Looks like this price has moved quite a bit since we last looked at it. So James Hardy has continued its breakout trade. It has been almost flagged and flagged several times over the last 2 months. And it looks like there is a bit of a correction coming into play now. So you're looking at the current 50-day moving average being at $24 and the stock currently at 25. See if we can put a bit of a trend line on this one. This has been flagged several times already, so you can decide how you want to go about it. The general lit long rule is to wait till it hits the 50-day moving average before buying back the sold leg. Maybe you can see that it has been trading through this range, and it's just about to hit the bottom of that range. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. If it can push through that, that might be a bit more of a pullback. Depends where your strikes are when you jumped into this trade, though, how you manage this. But you would expect to see quite a strong support at that 50-day moving average. And even at this level, there should be a lot of support there to keep pushing up. There's quite a large slope as well. So if you can weather this small price pullback, based on that chart, it should accelerate. Not accelerate, it should continue growing quite quickly. If there's nothing else, I might draw this session to a close. And keep in mind, we do have tonight a special webcast at 7 p.m. where we'll be announcing the winner of the options trading game, and we'll be also running through a bit of a few of the more interesting trades from the options trading game as well. Some of the winning trades and maybe some interesting takes on the market during the session. So 7 p.m, feel free to come along. Should be a great session. If you have any further questions, feel free to send them through on the chat box at the bottom of the page here. And when things are a little bit quieter, we'll be able to get back to you if it's non-urgent. Usually after 4:30, I'm able to spend a bit of time and get back to all the unanswered questions if they're not urgent. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you next week.